I had a red flag. I saw Penelope acting out. And I did have a red flag around that. It took me another year or so to understand it. But now looking back on it, I can see how we, the world, posed a problem, created a problem for Penelope. Yeah. Everything that Penelope wanted to do, we said, no, not this, but that.
Life is all about relationships. Lovers, family, body, or money. How satisfied you are can be completely explained by how you relate to things around you. This is Sophie Jaffe, and together with my husband, Dr. Adi Jaffe, we are here to explore and teach you how to maximize your relationships and achieve a happier life. Let's get ignited.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Ignited Relationships Podcast. I'm Adi Jaffe.
And I'm Sophie Jaffe.
And we're still in bullying month.
Yes.
Serious conversations.
Very serious. Yeah. Next month will be a little lighter with gratitude.
Well, we got to switch. It's just like when you go to a concert and they got to follow a really intense song with a mellower song.
Yep.
This is the really intense month.
Yeah. It's all important and it's all necessary.
100%. And I'm learning a lot. I learned a lot in this conversation. Actually, I'm really, really excited to share this one. But let's start out with the review of the week.
Yep.
The review of the week today is Truth Seekers. Love your podcast every week because you bring in guests from all realms of life. Every journey your guests are on are unique, and I always find myself relating to them and learning so much. If I can say a couple of words to describe Sophie and Adi, it's that listening to their podcast is like going on a spiritual seminar every week that transforms your life. Thank you. And thank you for taking the time out of your busy day jobs to host a podcast that improves the lives of thousands.
Aww,
That's
love
really
that.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, This is going to be one of those podcasts, I think, that's going to improve the lives of a lot of people. And you've got a little quote to bring us in on that, Soph.
Yes. So this is Ralph Waldo Emerson. Treat a man as he is, and he will remain as he is. Treat a man as he could be, and he will become what he should be. Just recognizing potential, recognizing greatness in others, what's possible, and this is a quote that, I feel like we talk about this kind of around this topic of bullying, and just there's so many aspects to what makes the bully, what creates a situation, what makes someone feel like they have to be defensive, like from parenting to, experiences that they have throughout life. Like there's so much that goes into it from both sides. And it's really I just feel like this quote is so relevant.
I think in the context of what we talk about specifically in this episode, there's actually a special meaning to this. Yeah. And it is, we see people in front of us and we are limited in understanding what they can be based on what they are in this moment and what we've learned to see people as.
Constructs.
I mean, Jodie talks about this in some pretty intense ways about her son. And especially, when you're young, this is so true. For so many of the people that I work with, these main issues came up when they were children.
Yeah. And
people underestimated and mistook who they are and what they can be later in life by boxing them up and putting them in these locked psychological cages of you're a nerd, or you're fat, or you're ugly, or you're poor, you're stupid, whatever that thing is. And all they were willing to see is this kind of momentary glimpse into a person's life. And I get it, because kids don't know, right? Like kids haven't seen people develop. Right. They don't know, this kid who's really, really nerdy right now is going to become the world's biggest entrepreneur later in life, because they're also a genius who sees things that the rest of us don't see and are able to connect dots and are really hardworking. They don't have all that. So they go, you're a nerd. And it's such a perfect kind of encapsulation of that experience of being limited. But some of us don't have enough belief. We don't have enough support from other people in who we are. And so we end up believing that box.
Exactly.
And I love that quote because I think we get a chance to do that all the time. You can always get a chance to look in somebody's eyes. I think this is part of my entire job, is to look in somebody's eyes and say, I don't see you as you are right now. I see you as you can be.
Yeah.
And give them that belief in everything that they can turn into, everything they can bring into the world.
Exactly. I think, and that is what makes you so powerful in your job and in your profession. And, you know, all of us, we all need that inkling, like, of hope. We all need, in times of darkness, to just someone to say, like, you're better than this, or I can see who you're going to be. I mean, energetically, do you remember those? I used to do these exercises. He's passed now, but his name was Nick. And I worked at Equinox in Santa Monica. And he was a personal trainer there. And he passed away at a really young age. But he was like otherworldly. And he would do these exercises where we would walk across the classroom, across the yoga room, and we were barefoot and we'd walk across the room, and he would tell us energetically what he saw. So for example, he would see this one other trainer who used to be 300 pounds. He saw him carry, and we all saw it. The way he walked across the room was as if he was 300 pounds heavier. Energetically, that's what he carried on him, with him, the weight of who he was. He hadn't yet stepped into who he was going to be and who he
had become.
He hadn't fully owned it yet. He hadn't really fully. So energetically, like, even us, like, we need to believe in ourselves and own it. You know, like, I'm kind of at an in-between stage right now where I'm like stepping into who I'm going to be, but I'm not who I was. And so it's uncomfortable. And I keep saying that. It's uncomfortable right now. Like, I've manifested a lot of things.
And now you have to catch up.
Now I have to catch up, and I'm going to give it all the time it needs. I'm going to give myself a lot of self-care and a lot of self-love right now, have a lot of strong boundaries, because I know that it's coming and I'm going to sink into it. I need to journal into it. I need to take all the practices that I know to help me become that best next version of me.
Sure. And this is why I've talked to you before about how the people you put around yourselves are so important, because look, and I don't mean to be crude about this, but like, the people you have around you right now see you as the person you've been.
Exactly. So I have to take some space. So I've taken space from every single person in my life. Every person in my life, I've taken energetic, physical space from, you know, unless we're getting a spa service, unless we're getting side-by-side massages, unless we're doing something where we're not really even like, because right now, that's all I can do. I can't do anything else. And then I can integrate everybody back in once I've fully owned who I am.
Yeah. So that's one way of doing it, is take distance, become who you need to become, and then let those people back in. Part of what I'm saying is sometimes you need to let new people into your life.
But that happens anyway, I think. Help you up level.
Understand or see you as the person you're becoming.
Yeah.
And so they don't even understand you the other way.
Right.
And it's this really interesting thing, because I mean, this is a comfort and the difficulty of having a ton of childhood friends around, because they see you as who you were, and some of your childhood friends are actually really far away, so they get to see you from afar.
Most
and they
of
see
them are.
You grow.
That's why it's beautiful.
When you're surrounded by all the people you grew up with, every time you act differently, they will literally say it to you. They're like, what the fuck is up your ass? Like, that's not who you are. And you're like, well, I'm trying to read more, or I'm trying to study, or I want to be more fit, or I'm learning how to cook. And they look at you like, you're not a fucking chef,
You're so
dude.
pretentious. Like, why are you, or why are you trying to be blah, 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 blah. Like, well, I'm trying to be better.
Yeah, and it's really, a lot of times it's hard for people. Well, especially around people who are not changing themselves.
It's uncomfortable to be around. Yeah.
So in the context of this.
But you know what I think is cool is I feel like we do surround ourselves with people who also want to be better. Truly.
Yeah.
And that us, even just by us up-leveling, it forces them to up-level too, or else they're not going to stick around, right? Energetically, they can't keep up, not even specific people. Just think about energy.
Yeah.
A person can't keep up with someone else if they're just changing and growing at a rapid pace. So you have to, in a relationship, in a loving marriage, if one person is doing the work, we see this all the time with couples that we work with. If someone cheats on one person, and it's in the relationship, if the woman cheats on the man, and then the woman starts doing all this work, and the man's like, yeah, you just disgust me, like you just did all this stuff, like takes no responsibility for what he did in the relationship, And she's going to therapy and she's going to healing groups and she's seeing shamans and she's traveling and she's journaling and she's meditating and she's doing all the things to uncover where the deep issues are. And he's just staying still and pointing the finger and being defensive. They will grow apart.
Yeah.
They will 100% grow apart. So energetically, we all need to keep being better and keep showing up, or you'll just gravitate towards something else on your level energetically.
Yeah. No, I think that's true.
Vibrationally, you'll attract where you are.
Yeah. And so what happens a lot of times around the bullying concept for me, and today we talk about it from a very unique angle, I think, is that people who are surrounded by others who don't see them as they could be, but instead see some small element of who they are right now, they get trapped. And the bullying happens around those people constantly pointing out this weakness to you. You start believing it, they believe it, and you get trapped in this place where that becomes who you are, the entirety of who you are. And Jodie brings this really interesting story about her son who was born a girl, and at a really early age was able to explain that. Well, by age of 3, able to express it in words. And the work that she had to do to help him step away from that, but also the level of discomfort that he experienced, essentially living as somebody different than who he believed that he was. And it brings up a really interesting element to me around bullying, because we're so quick, and everybody knows, bullies get bullied. Like, it's a whole thing of, the reason that kid is bullying is because they've been bullied. But we've normally talked about it from a violent standpoint. Like, the reason that kid is beating up other kids is because they get beaten up at home. And this made me think differently, because it doesn't have to, at least in this story, it doesn't have to be that there's actually violence at home. But yes, that bully has to be uncomfortable somehow. There's a level, a place where they feel out of sorts, they feel out of control, they're not exactly sure who they are and what to do. And what I like about it is hopefully it creates for you a little bit of tenderness and a little bit of curiosity around bullying. Because, and we talked about it this episode, we're living in a bullying culture right now. Our president's a bully. Yeah. And it's made it, look at what's happening to our politics. It's sort of made it so that everybody has to bully up, because, if the kid on the playground is punching everybody, then you got to figure out how to gang up on them, kind of a thing. And if we all keep getting into that mentality, then we end up all becoming this thing that we don't want.
Exactly. Totally.
So, I think we talked for a while here. We're going to let you guys sink into this. There's
pretty magical. Take some time to listen to this.
And we also talked about things that we never talked about the stuff we were going through with Leo and some of the things that we've been doing to try to change that.
Oh my gosh. This is just like a little, when you listen to this episode, this is so interesting. Yesterday, my stepmom was over and she was folding laundry. And she said, one day when you marry a woman and you blah, 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 blah. And he said, but what if I marry a boy?
Oh my God.
Completely, just because we've been having conversations about love looks like lots of things.
Yeah.
And she said, yeah, well then if you marry a boy, and she just kept on going. It was the most beautiful thing to witness. And it also was so normal.
Yeah.
It was so normal. We're so lucky that it was such a normal conversation,
Yeah.
So more on that in this episode, but it was just really touching and beautiful.
That's awesome
to witness. So thank you, Phyllis, for being awesome and just rolling with it.
Totally. I know, right?
It kind of feels like a dream. It was so perfect. The way it was just like, then will X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
If you marry a boy, fine.
Totally. Versus like, well, that'll never happen.
Yeah. And he said something like, he said, then we can't have kids. And I said, no, you can adopt. It just like chimed in from the kitchen.
Yeah.
It was just beautiful. It was just like such a natural, beautiful moment.
That's interesting. I even wonder, I wonder where you even got the
because we talk about love is love and we we continuously,
Cool. Well, you'll hear more about that topic here in a moment after this little break.
We'd love to hear your feedback on this and all of our podcasts. Please give us a review, whatever you feel on wherever you listen to podcasts, just give us a review. It really means so much to us, and maybe you'll be the one that we read at the beginning. Yep. We also really appreciate any social media love you can give, from a story, a tag, a swipe up, whatever feels authentic and good. Maybe just talk about what resonated with you. Like, we want to hear from you and we will reshare it. And it just means so much to us.
Yeah, and I have a feeling that this comes out right before our Glow event. And so we've got our first event.
Yay!
And
we still have a couple tickets left. And if not, if it is sold out, then just let us know and we'll try and find a way to weasel you in.
Yeah, I think we still have some tickets. I think unfortunately by this time they're all full price. So hopefully you got in at the earlier ticket price. But it is insane, the list of people that we have. Like if you've listened to this podcast and you're one of these people that likes this podcast, rent an RV, get an Uber, walk. You might have time to walk. Ride a bicycle, get to this thing. There's 1-day tickets and 3-day tickets available. But, somebody asked me, they were writing an article about the event and they were asking me what the thing about it was. And I said, I see all these events that are niche. They're like how to make money in real estate or how to level up your career or how to be more fit or how to create a better wellness routine or whatever. Ignited is not about any of those individual things. Ignited is about how to create fire and purpose in your belly so that all those things get done with a lot more motivation and internal will. Because in the end, if you know why you're doing things and you're clear on the level of excitement you have about something happening in your life, then you will move forward towards it at a speed and with veracity and excitement that you've never done before. And when you see the speakers that we have here, I don't care if you've had trauma or other people in your life had trauma. If you're struggling with addiction or people in your life are struggling with addiction or mental health. If wellness or motivation internally is part of your issue.
If you're even just like feeling a little low and you want to just be uplifted, like we just are good vibes. We've got great guests. They're all good vibes. They're all inspiring. They will all leave you feeling elevated. I crave this. I crave the connection. I need one-on-one connection, FaceTime with a person that I follow on Instagram. I need that. And I'm an influencer. I need that to feel fulfilled and alive and alert. Because if I have too much time behind my computer, or too much time at home, or too much time with the kids, or too much time on my phone, I lose sight of what really makes me me and what really makes me ignited and what really makes me feel connection. And connection is everything.
Yeah. So if you want to be happier and more connected, this is it for you.
Come.
October 18th through the 20th. It's going to be magic. We can't wait to see you there. See you on the flip side. Listen to Jodie. She's amazing.
Bye. This episode of the Ignited podcast is brought to you by Philosophy Superfoods. The Philosophy offers cleanses and other nutritional products that are unlike any of the other supplements and detoxification programs on the market. Why? Because they actually nourish the body with whole, live, nutrient-rich foods instead of depriving you and leaving you hungry. Have you ever tried a cleanse only to find out that you can't make it through a whole day because you're starving? Ever try a superfood shake that made you nauseous because it was so disgusting you'd rather not eat? The Philosophy fix all that with a simple set of offerings that load up your body with nutrients while actually tasting good. Makes sense, right? Each of the Philosophy superfood and protein blends is vegan, raw, gluten-free, and has absolutely no filler ingredients. With over 15,000 satisfied customers, including some of the world's biggest celebrities like George Clooney, Gerard Butler, Lea Michele, and over 10 years of experience, this is the best stuff you can get. To buy some or find out more info, go to our website, thephilosophy.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the conversation piece of today's podcast episode. This is going to be, I feel like this is going to be one of those episodes where we talk about things we haven't talked about before, and especially on this topic. And we've got the amazing Jodie Patterson with us. And Jodie, you've done so much, and there's so much we can talk about. I really want to start with this quote that I found of yours that really resonated for me personally. And it is, having children is the fastest and most direct way to understanding yourself. Through my kids, I'm able to see my flaws and my strengths and ultimately get closer to my true and most beautiful spirit. There's no hiding with kids. They force you to either succumb or rise above. I gotta say, I don't know that I was able to express it in the same way, but the idea that kids show you parts of yourself that you didn't realize were there before, and then make you just confront them head on is so spot on for me.
Thank you. You know, it's funny, when I wrote that, it feels like years and years and decades ago, and I can't even recall the actual date, but it was at a time when I have 5 children, and so my age range spreads, and so I had young children at home, I had babies, and I had school kids, and I remember at that time I was feeling like, the little kids, you can still pretend to be perfect, and with babies, you most certainly can pretend to be perfect, because really all they need is comfort, milk, and love, protection. But the older one, Georgia, who's my firstborn, was old enough to see things in more clarity. Mm-hmm. And I remember not being able to continue with the stories that I had presented to her. Yeah. And some of those were stories about my perfection. Some of those were stories about how I wanted the world to be. Some of those were stories about her community. And a funny moment was when Georgia asked me, "Mama, why am I not Black like you?" And so her father's from Switzerland. He's half Swiss and half Vietnamese. And so she was looking at her skin color and looking at my skin color and wondering why we were different. And she looked at hers. She's light, and she has light eyes and light golden hair. And she said, "Mama, why am I not Black like you?" And immediately I wanted to convey solidarity, that we were one family. So I said, "Oh, you are. We are both Black. I'm chocolate Black. You're golden Black. We are Black." And I said, "In fact, the whole world is Black." And that was really to centralize her, to make her not secondary, not a minority, but to say that the world revolves with you in it and centered on you. And so she said, "Everyone's Black, Mama?" And I said, "Yep, everyone." And she said, "Even Papa?" And I paused for a moment and I said, "Yep, even Papa." So that's like just a direct lie, right? And I said, "No, Papa's." And again, it was about putting her in the center. And I said, "Papa's just a light-skinned Black man." And we continued with that thought that the world and the family and her dad and mom and she and I were all Black. And one day when she was old enough, which was, maybe when she was 7 or 8 or 9, I can't recall, she said, "Mama, Papa's not Black. He's Swiss and Vietnamese." And I said, okay. So I noted to myself that the lies or the stories that we tell our children, for whatever purposes, at some point come to a head and they can no longer exist because they have a sense of reality, or they have a sense of their reality or an alternate reality. And so I had to, at that point, understand that Georgia was going to start demanding another level of maturity from me and another level of authenticity from me. And so I really had to start talking to her at that age around race and the complexity that she deserved at that age. And that was the first time I realized, our children will demand of us to really be, to grow with them. As they grow, we have to grow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's what I hear in there, is almost like wanting to protect them. Mm-hmm. And then recognizing that, they're going to go out and they're going to live in the world, and they're going to have to face reality. Although, again, when it comes to especially identity, especially the concept of who am I, what group do I belong to, how do people identify me, right? What labels and terms do people give who I am? That can be such a dicey topic, period, because, and I know we're going to get into this more deeply, just because sometimes people almost don't have the words to describe our identity, because, it's hard to ignore the fact that we're unique. Black is one label, white is another label, Swiss is another label as well, right? If you within Switzerland, there are people that live by the Italian-Swiss border,
Swiss German, Swiss French.
So you have to get so dicey with identity anyway, and there's just these shortcuts. We're just taking shortcuts all the time. Like, instead of just
for sure
talking about the person as who they are, it's like we have to categorize them somehow. And you tried to categorize her in a way that felt safe at the time.
Yeah, and the language in general is not broad enough for the human experience. And so we have this we develop language to make this broad universe smaller and manageable. And in doing that, we feel safe and life is predictable and it makes us feel like, we can do this. But with the sacrifice is that the language minimizes the experience. And it doesn't really give us we don't have a big enough language, a broad enough language to explain ourselves.
Yeah.
And so then we are forced to, which is a great thing, we're forced to redefine all the time and to expand language and to change it. And I remember, and so now 10 years later from that conversation around race, I am using and I'm changing the language in our house around gender.
Yes.
Right? So first it was like race, because that was the lens that I grew up in. I was a kid of the 70s. So my parents experienced racism in the South and in the North firsthand, hardcore during the segregated South, when America was much different than it is now in many ways. And so our lens was always through race. If you can collectively gather around Black folks, we will have a chance at being better and living better. And then as I grew up, I used that. And then as my children started to grow up, I realized that their identities they needed more than that community. So I have a trans son. My third child is a trans son. And although race helps me with most things, I needed to really sink my teeth into unpeeling gender and finding community around transgender realities. And that required another level, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think if I can, the way I understand the story, one of your kids, Penelope, came up to you one day and said, "I'm not a girl."
Yeah. It's pretty clear.
Yeah. And talk about labels, right? That's literally like another human. I mean, obviously you're a child, but like another person coming and saying to you, this word that you're using to describe me, this word that everybody is using to describe me, it's the wrong word.
You're the first person that said it that way. And that's exactly how it is. A lot of times people say, well, wait, so she was a girl first and then she switched to a boy, or, you're allowing a girl to think she's a boy. And really, this is the same person. Penelope is the same person that I birthed at 11 years ago as he is today. I changed my language around Penelope. Instead of saying she, I just say he. I changed my bias around Penelope. I was raising Penelope as a girl. And although we intellectually know that we shouldn't have bias when we raise our children, the bias is still there. And so when Penelope said that does not, if this means girl and this means boy, I am over there in the boy section. Like if you're going to categorize, put me over there. And I had to allow for flexibility of language on my end and flexibility of thought on my end. So essentially, Penelope is the same person. I had to do the work to allow Penelope the space that wasn't allowed to him as a girl, which is really tough for us to like put into our heads, because it's 2019 and we feel like, or 2020, what is it? What year are we in?
Still 2019. We're still good.
2019. We don't think that we categorize our children and limit the spaces that they go into. But if you really look at it, early on, we are raising kids with our own bias from the diapers. My boy diapers have superheroes. My girl diapers have butterflies.
So
butterflies,
true.
right?
So true.
Yeah, had to change all that up.
God, I mean, to me, this conversation is so all encompassing, because I gave a TEDx talk about rebranding your shame. And for me, it was about addiction and mental health, but still about labels, right? Still about this notion that you have a unique experience and then somebody tells you what it is by giving a word to attach to it. And we don't know better. So we say, oh, okay, that's the thing that describes me. But the problem is that term comes with a lot more than describing your experience. That term, all the terms, man, woman, child, adult, boy, girl, black, white, Swiss, American, like pick a word. The word becomes this
collective.
This collective representation of hundreds or thousands or millions of people. And what gets lost is the nuance of individuality. And sometimes it's not that big a deal, because you feel enough like the amalgamation of all of those experiences that you you do okay with the term. And sometimes it becomes literally destructive because it starts making you act like somebody who is not you, because you feel like you have to live up to the label. You have to find a way to fit what other people have put on you.
And it's, the hard part is sometimes we're living down to the label, right? We're not even, the label doesn't allow us to actualize our potential. And that's when it's really scary. I mean, I have such a strong belief in history and the women who came before me and the men who came before me. I was raised by revolutionaries. My grandmother was a civil rights activist in the South, changed laws. She fought hospitals and school boards. I mean, really moved America forward. My uncle was Gil Scott-Heron. He wrote The Revolution Will Not Be Televised, prolific singer, musician. So I have a respect for those who have come before us and the legacies that we hold. However, there is also a way that tradition and expectation can hold us back. And that's what I was seeing in Penelope. It was like he has all of this, all of the sheroes and all of the heroes, but that they still weren't enough to define Penelope, right? Penelope needed to definitively declare something that the language wasn't allowing for and the limitations around girl versus boy weren't allowing for. And so now, when Penelope said one day, and it was 2 years of anger. So from the first year of Penelope's life to the second year of Penelope's life, there was a lot of anger. Bullying other children, pushing siblings around, pushing kids at the park, down the slide, fighting, arguing. Anytime we wanted to get Penelope changed, Penelope would fight that. Anytime we wanted Penelope to brush hair, Penelope would fight that. Any touch to the body was rejected. Reoccurring nightmares, nail biting, bedwetting. So there were physical signs and there were emotional signs and there were just an attitude around Penelope held an attitude that was in protest all the time. So those were the first 2 years. And we tried everything from, dressing in boy clothing to adding in longer nap times to checking on diet. Maybe we thought it was a dairy allergy that was making Penelope so irritated. We tried everything that a parent would do. And then on almost the third year of life, I finally asked Penelope, why are you so angry? I hadn't done that before. I hadn't sat down with my kid and asked, what's going on? I was just fixing. And Penelope revealed to me something that was not even in my thought process. Penelope said, because everyone thinks I'm a girl and I'm not. Yeah. It was deep. It was clear as day.
One of your quotes is, the world is unkind to people it doesn't understand. Yeah. And one of the first signs that you knew, like as you're sharing, that Penelope was bullying other kids. And, our theme this month is surrounding around bullying, and on both ends of the extreme, being bullied and bullying. And this cry for help that Penelope was screaming out with other students, with other friends in the house, it sounds like.
Yep.
And just fighting for dear life, like, someone understand me.
And I think, so I saw Penelope was the bully, right? That's what you could have seen if you just happened to be at the park on that day. Penelope was the kid who was a bully. And I knew there was something deeper there. I knew there was something going on. It never occurred to me that it was something around identity. And so I have this understanding now that, I had a red flag. I saw Penelope acting out. I did have a red flag around that. It took me another year or so to understand it. But now looking back on it, I can see how we, the world, posed a problem, created a problem for Penelope. Everything that Penelope wanted to do, we said, no, not this, but that. No, not this pair of jeans, those jeans, not this sport, but this sport, not that tone of voice, this tone of voice. We were redirecting Penelope in all the ways that we direct children, how they speak, how they interact, what they do, who they are around. And that redirection of Penelope is like an affront. It's like an attack. If someone is redirecting your natural way, we are essentially saying that who you are should not be seen, but who we want you to be has to only be present.
Yeah.
And that becomes problematic. After a certain amount of time, you see suicidal tendencies, which we saw, and you see violent, aggressive tendencies, either to oneself or to others. You know,
how old was he at that point?
He was just turning 3. He was a month away from his birthday. Yeah, so he was still really young, really young. But what I found out is the mind, you know, when we start to think, well, how could my child be so young and know? And do I really is it responsible to listen to someone so young? But the mind, all minds, your mind, my mind, Penelope's mind, all start to identify, place the person in the world around 3. So the mind starts to say, like, if this word means boy and that word means girl, which one am I? And Penelope happened to be very verbal enough to say, I am a boy.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
You know, we hear this thing all the time that, well, maybe we hear it more now than we used to, but about, you know, this notion that bullies are bullies because they've been bullied, right? That's always the idea. But I feel like oftentimes the conversation leans towards violence. So the idea is their father is beating them up, or their mother is beating them up, or somebody else is bullying them physically, and they're now finding somebody else to control and find somebody else to push back against, so they don't feel as weak. But this proposes a whole different, not necessarily writing off the other explanation, but another way of looking at the concept of bullying, and that is almost like the unloading of discomfort, right? I am frustrated. I'm angry. Life is not as it should be internally. It's for whatever reason. And I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to make it okay. And so instead of that, I'm going to take my frustration out on somebody else.
So you've just really nailed what I've been thinking about recently. And that is, yes, that there are multiple worlds happening at the same time, right? Penelope's world, my world, which essentially were very different. The cisgender world reality, the transgender world reality. So multiple worlds happening at the same time. We typically don't even notice other worlds. Yeah. Most of us are blind to certain things and deaf to certain people, voices. And you might every now and then get a rumble when the train passes on the other track, right? But generally, they're like 2 trains passing on opposite tracks. If there's a collision of those trains, and there will be eventually, that collision will either awaken you, and you'll say, oh, shit, there's something else going on here. Yeah. Or it will take you under, and you won't survive it. And so my thought recently is like, I pray for the collision. I really want the 2 worlds that are silent to each other to expose themselves and collide, so that we can make adjustments, so that we can be more aware. I was only half living, not knowing anything about my trans kid.
Totally. Yeah. I think as a mother, it's just all you want is for those worlds to collide. All you want is to help, to be supportive. And we don't know what we don't know. And the sooner we can know, the better off we all are. And we know that. I mean, yes, you've had 5 children now, but you know, even with my first, like, I want to know everything about him. I want to know what he needs, what he wants, where he feels unsafe. What is he afraid of? You know, how I think,
totally. And I think that was if you were to look at it from the outside, you would have said Penelope was the bully or the disruptor, but that was the collision of the worlds. He was, he actually could see the multiple things happening at the same time. And he brought us together and said, you know, boom, wake up.
I mean, you know, so we talked, I mentioned in the beginning that I knew this was probably going to open up some aspects to our conversation that we haven't really talked about before, just because there's always elements to life that we don't necessarily talk about. And this brings up a lot of stuff for me around Leo,
right?
Our younger boy, right? So we've got 2 boys and a girl. And he's now, God, he's 7. I don't understand how he's 7, but I don't even know what's happening there. But from a pretty early age, let's see, we were living in the Valley, so it must have been at least 5 years ago. So he was 2 to 3.
Yeah.
It was his 3rd birthday, I think, where this specific thing happened.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he really wanted was an Elsa dress. He really, really loved, God damn it, Frozen. Frozen was the movie. Loved it, and really wanted the dress. And we're pretty accepting just in general. And we were like, sure. So his grandparents actually bought it for him. And you could tell he was really embarrassed to put it on. He went into his own room and tried it on only by himself, like only with us watching, and would never wear it out. But he wanted it, and he really liked wearing it.
He'd wear it. If no one was at the house, he'd wear it around the house all the time. He'd wear the shoes that lit up. He had a backpack, and also backpack. It's like the only movie that would keep his attention. He loved Frozen, and he's still, to this day, 7 now, he loves Sophia the First. Like, princesses are his jam.
Yeah. And so the funny thing about it is, and after he got a little bit more comfortable with me showing them it was okay, and wore a little bit around, and then just kind of left it, and hasn't really been
actually, he just grew out of it.
Out of that one. But I'm saying, but he's really fashionable. So to this day, this kid at 7 years old, like, picks outfits and kills it. Like, his fashion sense is better at 7 than mine has ever been will ever be.
When I go to events, I'm not kidding. He's the last look. Like, I'm like, what do you think? He's like, why are you wearing those earrings? Like, he will pick out, he thrives. He will pick out outfits for me the way they do on set. He will lay them out on my bed. Yeah. He smooths them out. And every single outfit pick is on point. Like, I'm like, where did you even find that?
No, I mean,
I wish that we could share these stories more, because as I'm listening, I'm having a parallel moment. So my youngest, Othello, is your child. Same thing. Like, he's very, he'll find his way into my room, into my closet, pick out the outfit that I then take a picture of because it's so on point, the dress, the bag, the shoe, the earring, and then knows not to wear that on the basketball court. We'll take all that off, and we'll like to spend an hour in the bathroom with me putting on makeup, but knows to take that off during certain times. And so it's like, I want to encourage all of the things he's into. So I buy him basketballs, and he's killer on the court, right? Take him to the Basketball Hall of Fame. And we also spend time doing the creative things. I show him David Bowie, and I show him Prince, and I, show him different folks that engage in the theatrical makeup, hair, from whatever perspective that they come from.
100%.
But it's like, how do we, and then at some point, my idea is that someone's going to be like, put words to that, sissy, gay, whatever those words are. That, I mean, gay might be a word to use. Maybe he identifies as gay, maybe he doesn't. I don't know. But some of the words might be pejorative. Some of them might be
girly.
There's meaner words for sure that get passed around too.
Right. We've actually struggled. We have 2 boys as our first kids, so we struggled with this already. Like, in their Montessori preschool, they would wear nail polish to school and be made fun of. And right away, I had the discussions with them, and I'd say, "Well, Kai, what did you say when they said only girls wear nail polish?" And he's like, "I didn't know what to say." And I'm like, "Well, do you like wearing nail polish?" And he's like, "Yeah." Like, okay. Does it bring you joy? Does it make you happy? Yes. That's all you have to say. There's when we have to give them the language. Yeah. I'm wearing it because it makes me happy, because I like it.
We have a phrase we pass around that I really like, and I wish somebody said it at my house. And I want to get to the other part of Leo's behavior, because I think there's even more parallels to what's going on for you. But we have this phrase, weird is good. And totally. And it's like,
normal is boring.
Because people will tell you you're weird, and they use it as a put down. But I gotta say, I mean, you use some examples. I don't see a lot of people we look up to in the world because they're normal. Like, who's that guy? Who's that woman who forged a path because they did what everybody else did? I mean, David Bowie is, a trailblazer is not even the right word for what that guy did. And it's exactly because he just followed his path.
Yeah.
Freddie Mercury.
And I think, I'm totally 100% with you. And I've been calling them revolutionaries, right? Because they go what is internally their compass, and they change the course of history of tradition. They don't erase the past, but they add a new dimension to it. So you'll have revolutionaries in politics, and you'll have revolutionaries that come out in music, right? And you'll have revolutionaries that change, day-to-day life or family life or the structure of, thoughts. And so I think, in my family, I just use the term revolutionary, and that means a David Bowie and the Gil Scott-Heron,
Yeah. I love it. Again, like if you just line up, like ask anybody a list of people to look up to in the world, and you just go through, not a single one of those people is on that list because they followed the usual path.
The rule.
Not one of them. And yet in everyday life, we keep putting down the people who stand by themselves. So the reason Leo came up for me so strongly is he also, I feel like it's a little bit less this year as he's growing up, but he also was bullying kids left and right. And we didn't know what to do with it because we're not aggressive people. We're not violent people. And to have our kid get into fights and push kids and call them names and threaten them. He
was threatening. And it was right around the time when I was pregnant with our baby girl, which he was the baby until 6 years ago.
Yeah.
He was a baby, slept in our bed, sucks his thumb. I carried him everywhere, still kind of do. And then all of a sudden, this baby girl was in my belly. Mommy was sick all the time. He could feel a change coming, and I'm very transparent and very obvious about what's going on. We took baths together, and he'd feel the baby kick, and it wasn't like super crazy about it the way that Kai was, our older. And then baby came, and he had to be quiet all the time. I was breastfeeding the majority of the day. His whole world turned upside down, and like that, I'd say the height of his bullying was last year. Last year was a really challenging year for him. And it was like easily once a week, his teacher was calling to say something else had happened.
And how did you deal with it?
That's the thing is we had a really, really hard time. So we would talk to him about respecting others all the time. And we really tried to get that point across to him. It's just that the conversation with you and even listening to your story made me start thinking about a complete flip, and not because I think he knows to respect other people. That's just the way we live. Yeah. What is going on internally for him that feels like he's being disrespected, or like his needs aren't being met, or his identity is being trampled upon, right? Because if he's feeling that, then he can feel like he should respect other people. But if he's not getting the same respect back, then why not? And that could be a really interesting conversation. This is really flipping my view on it a little bit in terms of the conversation I could have with him about it. Penelope was so good at vocalizing it. I'm sure you were doing other things the entire 2 years previous to try to, as you mentioned, reduce the aggression, reduce the pushing, reduce the resistance. After that conversation happened and there was recognition by Penelope of what happened, a vocalization of it, and then you absorbing it, what changed?
Yeah. The change happened in that room first. I changed the setting. So I actually, when I sat Penelope down, I didn't sit Penelope down in the living room or amongst other people. I took Penelope and myself into Penelope's room for a timeout together, closed the door. It was just the two of us. And I sat down on the floor where we were eye to eye, as opposed to me standing on top, up above. So I leveled the playing ground and I asked a lot of questions. And then I stopped talking and just let him talk and ramble and spill everything, even the hard things. Didn't try to figure it out, didn't try to probe. I just let him talk. And that pause that I took on fixing, or that pause I took on understanding, I wasn't trying to understand it at that point. I was just listening. I carried that out for the next several months with him. So I think that's something that we need to think about doing as parents, like honoring that space of darkness or confusion that we may have in this new area. So, for example, I didn't fully understand what trans meant, and I was okay with that. It took time to understand it. And it's that area where we don't understand something makes us very uncomfortable. Obviously, we're mostly on autopilot as adults in our 40s, 50s. we've done a million things. We've experienced crying children. We know what temper so we don't really probe the unknown. But when we get to the unknown, we need to just sit there. And that's a really awkward point because it feels like forever and it feels like failure on my end. It did. And it took me, it did take me down the spiral. But I set myself up. I said, okay, I'm going to do 10,000 hours, like Malcolm Gladwell says, 10,000 hours to become an expert at anything. So I was like, I'm going to give 10,000 hours to understanding what transgender as a word even means. What does that mean? And who are people who are transgender? Like, let me see them. So 10,000 investigative hours. And that gets you someplace. It doesn't answer all the questions, but it gives you a base level understanding, which is important. And from there, Penelope started to literally stand up tall, like shoulders up, right? Smile, as opposed to, and I can show you pictures where he looked grumpy and angry and like shying away from everything. So like, when someone looks inward and their shoulders are turned inward, their eyes are pointing downward. And then post-conversation, Penelope was standing up tall and smiling and engaging with people. He's now like, at 11, he's like class president. He's a straight A student. He's like on the team, sports teams. He's a partner, friend.
How old is he now?
He's 11, he's 11 in the 8th grade. And
wow.
I would say, night and day in terms of his personality. Do you have any advice for people or going through what Penelope went through, or for the families, but specifically like people like Penelope whose families maybe don't give them that space or never did honor that space? Like, do you have any advice? For the child? Or for
the person, for the child?
Yeah. For the child, it's find your family. So Penelope went to his biological family and I answered. And then we also saw chosen family come in and take a part of the new understanding. And so I always say find family. That could be a person in your biological family. It could be a neighbor. It could be a classmate. It could be a principal. The principal at our school has taken it as her mission to understand life broader and to understand. And so she became part of our chosen family, the principal of our school. So I always say find family. And that takes a lot of courage. And it also takes a lot of intuition. Not everyone is the right person for you. Yeah. So you really have to develop that skill of like, it's a people thing, right? The goal is to interbe. And you have to interbe with somebody. Right? So find family. Find someone who supports you as you are. Find someone who's willing to grow with you. And, my mom used to say, follow the sun, which is like follow the goodness, find goodness. Wherever that goodness is, it will be a light and you'll follow that light. Yeah. And it's a little bit esoteric, but it's like, you can't just, again, words aren't big enough to describe this process, but I just find family.
And I guess the other thing is just like, there is no cookie cutter right way to do anything in these issues. With Leo, like when you said like, well, what did you do? Really, we tried a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. We got on a phone call with a therapist who's a child therapist and who was on our podcast. So I felt safe, talking to her, like she somewhat understood us. And we put him in jiu-jitsu 4 days a week, and we know he has a lot more, he has a lot of physical activity, and
he's very, very active.
He's very active and very physical, way more so than our other son. And we tried everything. We're trying to give him now more one-on-one attention with dad. Every day, at least 30 minutes of attention from his dad. And he needs one-on-one. He's now, in his mind, he has been abandoned. He's not as smart and amazing and cool as his older brother.
Oh, he might be cooler.
He's cool.
He's not as bookish. He's not as bookish and scholastic for sure.
He's constantly compared to his older brother. So whether or not we think he's the coolest kid in the world, he doesn't think so. And the other night he was crying after acting out. And Adi said he couldn't have dinner and he couldn't hang out on Adi's birthday with the rest of us. And he put him in his room, and it was just like the the final straw of like a very difficult couple of weeks. And he was like, you know, the way Leo responded was like, just it kept trickling. This is what he does, is he just keeps making it worse. And it's awful to watch and witness. And I walked in, he's just been bawling for like a solid hour. And he's just like, I'm just different than you guys. I'm just different than all of you. And I'm like, then who? He's like, I'm different than Kai. I'm different than you. I'm not the same. And when he was speaking mostly in reference to the fact that he feels like he can't control his body and that he's too physical and that he but in his mind, I know he inherently thinks that he's bad and that he's not good. And that breaks my heart. And I think that the point that I'm making is that like, it's like when you said, just be in the pause and just be in the unknown. Like we don't fucking know what we're doing. Like we have no idea. We have no idea. And Kai is just right now has been way easier and he was our first. So with Leo, it's more perplexing and more challenging on a daily basis, on an ongoing basis, but we are here for it and we will keep adjusting and we will keep, increasing the discipline and decreasing the discipline and increasing the love and increasing the connection. But like, it's a constant work in progress. And I think for anyone who's struggling with anything with their children, just knowing that like, it's very intuitive and it changes all the time. And it's communication, we're communicating with his teachers. We're communicating with his caregivers. We have a live-in au pair. Adi and I are, communicating, but it's like, it just is constant. And it's about being on him and making him feel love without making him feel like he's bad. Because they're not bad.
And sometimes I feel like I found myself listening to your story and remembering and seeing myself in you, constantly bending around my child and my children to adjust, right? Like I'll do anything. What is it? And it was the things that Penelope needed the most were the things I wasn't seeing. I didn't know them. Yeah. So they weren't even showing up on my radar. So I was looking, but as we all know, when you're looking in the direction that you think to look in and you're seeing the things that are in your scope. So I never even thought to unpack gender as in cisgender, transgender, gender nonconforming. I was thinking boy, girl, like, tomboy type of thing or lesbian. And so I never even saw it. So one of the things I think now in retrospect is the more diverse the parents' lives are. Yeah. So we can't assume to know the fixes for our kids. But if we set ourselves up in our lives and our friend group and our travels as diverse as possible, and I don't mean like a trip to Italy and then a trip to Istanbul in the same friend group. I mean, wherever you go in life, do you have gender nonconforming friends? Do you have rich and poor friends? Do you have educated in the classroom and educated elsewhere friends? Do you have a diverse group of faithful people? Right? Are people praying differently? And when I started to diversify the people around me, my language expanded. My children's language expanded. Their trust in me expanded because they saw things, they identified with some of my friends who were different and said, oh, well, if Teak, right, if Mama's boyfriend is a trans man, then Mama must really understand me and believe in me. So I'm now dating a trans person, or a person who's trans. His name is Teak Milan. And so not only do I march the Trans Day of Visibility March, right? Not only do I sit in lobbying sessions with our elected officials to talk about trans rights, but in my home life, we have gender diversity. We have an open conversation about lives that are different. And so my kids can now talk about things in a safe space where it's just more safe for them. And I didn't even know that it wasn't safe. But if our lives are very myopic, then our children can't find themselves.
Totally.
They just can't. Yeah.
Totally. So true. It's hard to talk the talk and not walk the walk and say to somebody else, no, but I really mean it. I don't do any of it. But
I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but yeah, sure.
But it should be. You really, really should. That's so interesting. And I also love that, kind of take us back to where we started this conversation. You had a conversation with your daughter, your oldest daughter, about race because race was familiar and you knew the conversation there. And growing up as a Black woman, you experienced it firsthand, right? So you knew that conversation. And to have the wherewithal, B, the humility, and C, to take the time, right? How many parents, when they find out that there's a topic the child needs to understand that they don't understand, commit to essentially becoming an expert in that space? We can all say we want to give our kids everything, but then all of a sudden we're like, well, I can give you 15 minutes on next Friday because I'll drive you to school and we'll talk about your favorite character on cartoons.
Totally.
That's not really the same as giving your kid everything they need. And so to just say, you know what, I'm going to sit with you and I'm going to talk this out. I don't really know what I'm talking about, and I'll let you know that. And we're just going to explore this until we feel like we even understand what we need to talk about. And then I'm going to go all in on figuring out. That's everybody talks about family values. I feel like we get lost right now in this. I don't know. I feel like we're stuck in a bullying nightmare right now in our country, period. But
there's a lot of bullying on large levels and on small levels in the house. I think that older folks bully younger folks. I think that cisgender people bully gender nonconforming people. I think the majority, quote unquote, normative thought bullies, disruptive thought. It's just this whole concept of othering, right? There is an other, and we are better than the others, right? And that you see that in the way we treat people, the way we treat the land, the way we raise our families, and the way we grow our businesses. And I found that, it's so obvious that form is not working anymore, right?
Right.
This very dominant approach is not working. Our land is shot. Our families are shot. We are exhausted, and our government is something we've never seen before. So this idea that we can forcefully and bully our way and through strength and power and muscle progress in life that idea has been shown to have major flaws. And so the way I want to approach it now is something I've been calling mothering as social architecture. And when I talk about mothering, I don't mean hugs and kisses and affirmations, although those things are nice. I mean mothering as building. So when I'm looking at my family as a mother, and this is what mothers have been doing for centuries, I'm just trying to put words to it now so we can change our approach. When you look at mothers, we look at the structure, which is our family, top down. We say what is structural and cannot ever be destroyed, and what is aesthetic and could be changed. And then we look at it 3D and we see all the different compartments of this building or this structure or this family. And mothering as architecture, we need to be able to grow the structure with strength from the foundation up, and beautify it, of course, but really it's fundamental. It's like architecture. It's fundamental growth. And that I would like to see in the house, really giving validity to what mothers, or the concept of mothering, which can be done by any gender, what mothering has been doing for centuries. And we want to keep that in the home. We want to bring it to the office. We want to bring it to our government and our larger society, our larger communities. It's a whole flip of a way of interacting and a way of developing ourselves.
Yeah, and it moves away from, I feel like when people use family values as a term now, what they're really saying is a return to Christian 50s life. And it's
up value.
And it's this is a news flash for nobody, but maybe an awakening for some. That time wasn't that great, people. It really wasn't. The world had just emerged out of a world war that almost destroyed our current world order. A lot of people died in that process. And so people went back to safety. And the only people who were really doing well were upper middle class and above white men, which is probably a continuing theme since then. But
for sure.
But it's kind of like this. It's this whisper, right, of family values. If we all had more dinners together, then everything would be fine. And sure, if what we're talking about at the dinners and the way we accept and appreciate and understand the people around us expands beyond what we thought was normal in the 50s, because guess what? Life changes, right? And concepts changes and realities continue evolving. And so these concepts of gender nonconformity for sure, but I mean, look, your family has been fighting the racial war for decades, and it's not done. It's not where it was in the 30s and 20s and 40s, but it's not done. Sophie and I just moved into a new neighborhood, and one of the things this neighborhood is known for is that when it was formed in the 1920s, the deeds, literally the land deeds themselves, were segregationist. So no Jews, Blacks, Hispanics, I forget what else. There were specific categories that were not allowed to purchase in this in the area that we live in right now. And what's interesting about it is I'm Jewish. Sophie's converted to Judaism. Our kids are Jewish. My family's from Israel. And it was a nice little reminder that when I walk down the street, currently everybody just sees me as just like an upper middle class white guy. That if I backtrack 60, 70, 80 years, there are a lot of negative words to use about my people. And World War II didn't exactly necessarily fix that. So family, I'm all for family values. I'm all for families coming closer together. But I think the conversation we just had about what does that actually mean for your family members?
Yeah, right.
Versus the old school mentality of, as long as your kid plays football or baseball and they're good at running and they make it to homecoming court or whatever the hell the kind of standard is, as long as we truly make it about family values, right? So like, what do my kids need? What does my Leo, why is he struggling the way he's struggling right now? And how do you talked about mothering, and I love that as a concept for me even to take on, right? This concept of, okay.
Looking at it from structurally and like, so the family is, and it's exactly what you said, like not who we think we are, but like, let's really peel back all the layers and look at the structure of this family. Not one child can be lost, because children are structural to this building. All parents are structural. They cannot be lost either. So what are they? Are they arches? Are they standing up straight? Like, what do we look like as a structure if we're all, working together to keep this structure up? And then you start to see what people are good at, right? What they actually do. Not like what color hair they have or what color dresses they wear, but how they hold up this structure, right? So I know that Penelope is here to help us understand ourselves below the body, in the spirit. Right? That's what he brings to the structure of this family. And my son Cassius, who's 13, is helping me to understand differences. And this is going to be even more strange. So Cassius does not believe that transgender exists. He's the brother, he's 13, and he doesn't believe that transgender exists.
Yeah.
And so, sorry, I had a little feedback. He doesn't believe that trans exists. And he says, I will always respect my brother. I will always use the right pronouns. Penelope can do anything in this life, but Penelope scientifically is a girl. Yeah. And so that could have hurt. It does, I'm sure, hurt Penelope's feelings. And it makes me mad because really the science is there to show gender variance as a fact. But in the last 8 years that these kids have been living together as brothers, they still don't agree. Penelope is trans and understands that reality. And Cassius is cis and has a very cis-normative mentality. Yeah. Not because I've raised them differently. So in our house, Cassius is here to show me that the goal is not to agree. It is just to coexist with our differences. And respect. And so like each person you have to look at each person as a structural entity, find out what they are here for. And then that's their purpose. Not to like fit the form or agree with us or, make nice at dinner time. Cassius actually is a real pain in the butt at dinner time. Right? Because he's like talking this craziness about like trans doesn't exist and I don't think abortion should be legal. He's like one of those folks. Yeah. He's 13. But like we will not lose him as a kid in the family.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Wow. Okay. I think we might actually need to. Normally I say, when I have these conversations and I don't want to end them, I say like, we can talk for 4 hours. I actually feel like we need to have another one of these.
I hope so. Please bring me back again.
Yeah, just to discuss that element, right? Just because you even do all the work, it doesn't mean we're all going to sit and agree on everything that ends up happening. We still are going to, if we honor individual differences, we need to actually honor individual differences. So we have 5 questions that we ask all everybody.
Them, right? The trans kid, the science kid.
All of them, 100%. We have 5 questions we ask everybody, and I can't wait to hear your answers. And the first one of those is, what is the best advice that you've ever received?
One really great, I have 2 that pop into my mind. My grandmother, Gloria Blackwell, she was married 5 times. She married one man twice. She had an outstanding career in education, was a tenured professor at in the South at several colleges, at a time when America wasn't even sure she was valid enough to go to school, right? Valid enough to live. And she said to me, I was going through a divorce, and she said, and I was trying to figure out my career, and she said, Jodie, there are so many men in the world and there are so many jobs. Never worry about either. And that wasn't to like diminish love of a person or love of your career. She just was like, don't get fixated on failure. It is not failure. Don't operate out of fear that this is the last person that will love me or this is the last job I'll have. You can move through life knowing that there are many men and many jobs for you. So that took the bite off of what we oftentimes think about.
Yeah.
Career and a spouse. Right?
I love it.
And backstories, I've been married twice. Right? So clearly I understood what you were saying. And then another friend of mine who is also Southern, and she's about 20 years younger than I am. She was staying at my house for a while, and it was during the time when I was really sad about Penelope, and I was crying all the time. I would take the kids to school, come back on the couch, and just sink into the couch and cry for hours. And so one day she said to me, okay, Jodie, so big girls, we type and cry at the same time. And I was like, well, what that means is it was, I guess, at a time when people typed on typewriters. Right? Yeah. Southern saying, and although we are sad, we still are about the business. So you will be sad and you will cry, and you need to learn how to work through the problem, work through life while crying. Don't deny the crying, but stay focused on the process. So I've learned to type and cry at the same time.
I love it. That's so great. You've done a lot in life. What has been your proudest moment to date? Ooh,
you're isolating one moment. Okay. So many things I've had that have been milestones. One of the things that stands out strongly right now in my mind is, so I've been an advocate a public advocate for several years now. Yeah. And I've done a lot of work publicly around gender acceptance. But I'm always speaking as a parent. I'm always speaking from a very personal perspective. I haven't studied it. And I feel not always the smartest person in the room. And I'm oftentimes in boardrooms and in the offices of elected officials. I recently was elected as the co-chairman of the board of the Human Rights Campaign, which is our largest LGBT organization.
Oh, wow.
And so, although we're not supposed to geek out on other people's recognition, it made me very proud of myself to see the work that I've done, to see the progress that I've made on a personal level, and to be a voice that others are inspired by. So to be elected as the board co-chair of our largest organization made me feel proud of myself.
So beautiful. I love it. And
very
dedication.
vain,
but the dedication, right, in that moment when you decided to put in those 10,000 hours, it's like the payoff of all that effort.
Yeah. And it's funny because I don't have these moments, like I don't really geek out on, because career has been so demystified by my grandmother. I'm usually not raising my hand like, oh, I got a promotion, or oh, I got a raise. I feel so accomplished. But that moment when other like-minded activists have said, we actually want to hear from you. We want you to lead us in this fight. That was like, okay, I'm doing something that I think is important.
That's awesome. On the flip side of that, what has been, I'll let you pick one of, and not just but what has been the most difficult moment you've dealt with to date?
I think, I was so myopic in my focus on Penelope. At one point, the directive was save Penelope, because I had seen suicidal tendencies in my 3-year-old, and I was focused on not losing Penelope. And because we are finite people, I only had but so much energy and so much time. Other things in my life and other people in my life didn't get all of my attention. And the hardest thing has been to realize and to see and to have to deal with my son Cassius being angry with me and not getting what he needed from me. And so I've had to use these last 3 years of redirecting my attention on Cassius and understanding him and finding out what makes him tick and treating his science mind as important as Penelope's identity, transgender identity. So I have had to geek out on science and try to understand Cassius and listen to his rhythm and give him the space he needs and follow his lead. And this is when it's hard, because for some reason, Penelope's journey aligned with my journey. It was really easy for me to support him. Cassius's journey, the scientist, is much harder for me, right?
Oh, interesting.
It's like people say, oh my God, you're such a great mom. I'm like, I just got lucky. Like Penelope and I got lucky. We tick in the same way. Cassius and I don't tick in the same way. So, not all the time. Sometimes we do. So it's an extra effort to be this great mom with him. And that's been really difficult. It was a big fuck up on my part, probably unavoidable, because look, I had to do what I had to do. Yeah. But now I'm spending the painstaking time geeking out on science and geeking out on my son. And it's paying off. First year he's ever said, Mom, I love you. Like as a preteen, I love you. First year of ever getting a present or a birthday card from him, Yeah. So that was difficult to know that I dropped the ball on my kid.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for admitting that. That's a tough one. Now you do a lot. You've done a lot. You put so much work into your advocacy, but also obviously into your children. What is some of the self-care that you put into everyday life so that you can show up in the best way for yourself, your family, the people you advocate for?
I try, and this summer has been difficult for me since my book came out, but I try to run in my neighborhood on the streets, not in a gym, but I run for like 45 minutes. I try to do that several times a week.
Nice.
Makes me feel great. I listen to Drake for 45 minutes, get my bravado up.
Go Drake.
Yeah, no, Drake is good for running. John Mayer is good for falling asleep. So running is great self-care for me. And then I do about another 45 minutes of stretching and balance work.
Nice.
I read. So even when my schedule is busy, I like to read a lot. I'm reading James Baldwin right now. And that gets my mind right. I always find that like I have to be in love in some form. That has been with, that can take many different forms right now.
Sure. I
am in a really loving relationship. And so that's not a reality for everyone, but we have to find love.
Yeah.
Whether it's, someone our age, that it's an intimate love relationship with, or love of children. Just you have to be around love. And so I've really dedicated myself to finding love and then being in that love and then being love myself.
That's awesome.
And then honestly, just little shit like cleaning my house brings me immense joy. Making my bed. My bed is picture perfect every day.
I love it.
That Virgo rising organization in my house is key. If my house is not organized visually the way I like it, nothing gets done.
Yeah. There's a level of satisfaction when everything is in its place, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Totally. Okay. Last one. This podcast is called Ignited.
Mm-hmm.
What gets you ignited? What gets you fired up?
Ooh, in a good way?
Yeah. You can tell us about the bad way too, if you feel like it.
I've never had that question asked before. Jeez, that's a tough one. So I really get into revolutionary stories, revolutionaries. I read revolutionary thought all the time. And I'm constantly, like, if you look at the books that I'm reading, there's an enormous amount of notations on the side paragraphs, on the sidelines.
Yep.
And it sparks my mind around what we can do today, what I can do with my children, how I can approach something different in the boardroom, what I'm going to say to this senator when I speak with them. Looking at revolutionary thought gets me totally like alive and popping. Because I think most of what we're dealing with today, all of the isms and oppression are fairly similar. Like, oppression doesn't change shape. It's pretty rudimentary. So if you look at how we were oppressed during one era, and if you look at the gender oppression that's being seen now, it is similar. So when I look at revolutionaries, it helps me think of how we can deal with today. So I don't live in the past, but I like the idea of people who have been counterculture, people who have taken a shitty situation and brought it up and changed it and course corrected. And so actually seeing that gets me really fired up. So I would say James Baldwin. to put it simply, James Baldwin gets me fired up.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, given what you do and what your family's been involved in, et cetera, the idea that exposing yourself to revolutionary thought is a source of fire and ignition makes so much sense.
So funny you say that, because the book I was reading during the period when I was writing my book was The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. And so that when just the word fire and the fire next time and that imagery is spot on. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Like I said, I really feel like I want to schedule another one of these for one of the other topics that we hit on and we couldn't go deeply in. But thank you so much, Jodie, for taking your time.
Thank you.
And for the work you do, right? For the advocacy, for the ability to pay attention where maybe a lot of other people don't, and then start calling attention to it so that more of us do pay the attention that these things deserve. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that are grateful that you get put in these positions to go talk to the people you talk to who otherwise just would pay absolutely no attention to these topics. So thank you so much for that work.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you seeing me and remembering some of the small things that I've said in my book and in my talks, and reminding me of the work that I'm doing. Sometimes, can get caught up in the minutia, but I'm going to invite you over for dinner and we can we can get deeper into it. Your whole family is welcome for dinner.
Please. And you mentioned California is in the book. So when you come over,
sure.
we'll have you over for dinner and a pool party, which
yes, I'm down.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for listening. You can pick up your jaw now and get on to work or whatever it was you were supposed to do and now you're late to because you've just been sitting around listening to this podcast. And we will see you next week. Thank you. Love you all. Thank you everybody for listening to the Ignited podcast. We were so happy to have you along for this ride. Please go and subscribe to this. Leave us a review. We love hearing from you. And if you want more, don't forget to go to ignited.com, where all the podcast episodes are available with show notes and so many of the little details and links from each one of these interviews. And you can look at all the future events that we have going on, all the things that make Ignited so special, even beyond this recording. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next week.